Hi, this is Lisa with Holland Designs Crochet. Today I'm going to demonstrate for you some rows of the Diamond Sunburst row. This was a pattern which I came out with in 2018, so it's about 5 years ago now. So this one begins with a multiple of 8 chains plus 3 extra chains. And you make this blanket to any size, so you can decide any length or width that you'd like to make it, and you can also use yarn and hook of choice. But I'm just doing a small sample swatch here for you today. And so again, it begins with a multiple of 8 chains plus 3 extra chains, so I've just done chain 19 to start for this little demonstration here. And so row 1 is very simple. We're simply working a single crochet in the second chain from the hook and in each chain across. And so my stitch count at the end of this row will be 18 single crochets. And then row 2 will be where we create some loops, chain 6 loops. And we'll end up having 1 loop per each of the single crochet stitches of row 1. And so it's important to work the loops correctly and make sure you have the correct number of loops mathematically so that the diamond pattern will work out. So that's just something to keep an eye on, a stitch count. Make sure that you're doing that correctly. So I'll demonstrate for you row 2. We end row 1 with a chain 6 and turn. And this chain 6 becomes our first chain 6 loop of row 2. We join with a slip stitch in that first single crochet. So that's our first chain 6 loop. And then we just work chain 6 loops all the way across the row by working a slip stitch in the next single crochet, doing chain 6, and then again slip stitching into the same stitch. So we have a chain 6 loop for the second single crochet of that row 1. We just repeat that all the way across. And so by the time we get done with row 2, I will have a total of 18 chain 6 loops. The very last loop of this row is worked a little bit differently. So I will come back once I finish this row and show you how the very last chain 6 loop is worked. It's actually a chain 3 and a triple crochet into the same space. So I'll show that to you in a moment. Okay, I've just completed most of the row here, row 2. See, I've got my loops there. It looks a bit ruffled, but that will be lay nice and flat and make a cable as we continue, a diamond pattern as we continue. So the very last stitch of this row, we work a slip stitch into the last single crochet. Then we do a chain 3 and end with a triple crochet in the same space. And so our last loop of the row is worked that way so that we are positioned then at the top of the loop. So we're ready to work our single crochets for row 3. So that's why that's done that way. I still call that a chain 6 loop, but it's chain 3 and a triple crochet. So you're positioned at the top of the loop. So then for row 3, we begin with a chain 1 and we turn our work. And now we are going to simply work a single crochet into that loop there at the base of the chain 1. And now we're going to be working basically sets of 4 loops across. And we're going to skip 2 loops and then work 2 loops. But the way that we push the skipped loops on the row, if we push them to the back, then we'll be crossing them a certain way. If we push them to the front, we'll be crossing them the opposite way. And so that's what the pattern is basically skipping 2 loops, and it says initially to push them to the back of your work. We single crochet in the next 2 loops, just 1 stitch per each loop. And then we go and we work into the skipped loops, a single crochet in the first loop and a single crochet in the second loop. And so our first 4 loops have been crossed in a manner where these 2 are slanting to the right. And now for the next 4 loops, we're going to push 2 to the front. We're going to single crochet into the next 2 loops and then work into the skipped loops. Single crochet in the first one, single crochet in the next one, And so you can see how our second set of loops, 4 loops, have been crossed the opposite way. So we're starting to create a diamond pattern. So the first set crossed to the right, the second set crossed to the left. And we would just repeat that all the way across this row. And the repetition, the overall repetition over 8 loops is written in the brackets. The small repetition is written within the parentheses. So you push them to the back, single crochet in the next 2, then you single crochet into the skipped loops at the back of the work, and then the next 4 you push 2 to the front, work in the next 2, work in the skipped loops at the front, and then the very last loop of the row you simply work a single crochet into that loop. And so on row 3, you can see here you've created the start of a diamond pattern. So you've got basically V's that you're creating, the bottom of a V. So that's row 3. And then I will just come back and show you row 4 and 5. Okay, row 4, we simply begin with a chain 1 turn at the end of row 3, and then we're working a single crochet in each single crochet across. So row 4 is simply going to be basically a repeat of row 1, where you're having just single crochets across. So on this row I'm going to have a total of 18 single crochets, just like I had on row 1. So I've just worked that, and at the end of this row, let me just double check my stitch count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So 18 single crochets again. And then row 5 is simply a repetition of row 2. So we do a chain 6 and turn our work. And then we just continue again, a repetition of row 2, working the chain 6 loops across the entire row. And again, ending with the chain 3 and triple crochet in the last loop. And so again, this is a row 5, and it's a repetition of row 2. And then row 6, we will come back and show it to you in a moment as well. Okay, I've just completed row 5, which was the loop row, which was a repetition of the original row 2. And now row 6, we are going to repeat row 3. And so we are just doing a chain 1 and turning our work and working a single crochet into the first loop. So this is again, the row where the cabling happens. So the diamond cable is being worked. We push the first 2 loops to the back. We single crochet in the next 2 loops. Then we pick up the skipped loops at the back of our work. The next 2 loops are pushed to the front. We single crochet in the next 2 loops and then work into the skipped loops at the front of our work. You can see how it's starting to create what looks like a half diamond on this side, and then this in the center will be a diamond. So we'll just continue with this row. Push these to the back, single crochet in the next 2 loops, work into the loops that were skipped here at the back of our work, and then the last set of 4 we push 2 to the front, single crochet in the next 2 loops, and then work into the skipped loops at the front of our work. And the last loop of the row, we just work a single crochet there. So you can see how we've created a diamond here in the center, what looks like half diamonds on the edges. When you flip to the other side of the work, you have 2 full diamonds. So as you're working longer rows, for a full blanket, you'll have diamonds all across the center, and one side will look like finished diamonds and the other side will look like half diamonds. And then we're almost done with the repetition. The next row is going to be row 7, and that is a repetition of row 4, which is simply a row of single crochet. So we just want to make sure our stitch count is correct on these single crochet rows. So I'm working 18 single crochets across this row. And then the entire pattern just continues with repetition of rows 2 through 7. And you just work until your blanket reaches the finished size that you want for your blanket. And what actually creates this diamond pattern is this row of single crochet between the cabling rows. So that would be the row 7s or the row 4s. That row of single crochet is what causes the cable rows to switch between an odd row and an even row. And that's what creates that diamond effect. So even though every time you're working in the cabling, it's just a row 3 repetition, which is identical every time, it creates the opposite effect because you're on the opposite side of the blanket when you're working it. So as from here, I would just continue with my loop row, which would be a repetition of row 2. So this is what this pattern consists of. Just a couple things to keep an eye on, basically stitch counts. Make sure you got the right number of single crochets, the right number of loops. Make sure you're following the written pattern and making sure that you're actually crossing your loops properly. You'll notice if you've made a mistake and somehow your cabling's not, your diamonds aren't coming out properly. You'll just be able to go back and pull it out and say, oh, I made a mistake there. It'll be easy to discern that. So you can see how this one almost looks a bit like the Sunbursts. So it's called the Diamond Sunbursts. But so you've got diamonds and it almost looks like sunbursts if you look at it from the other perspective. So really pretty, fun textured cable design. Just uses basic stitches, you know, chain, single crochet, and then a triple at the end, but basically that's all it is. The loop rows of making chains can be a little tedious, but the overall result of it is so pretty that it's probably worth it, you know, just to get through those loop rows. Everything else goes quite quickly once you get the loop row done. The actual single crochet rows go really quickly, so it builds quickly from there. So hopefully you'll enjoy this pattern. I did the sample in a worsted weight yarn with a K-hook, just like I've used here for the demonstration, but it would look gorgeous in, you know, a baby yarn like a 4-ply or a sport weight yarn or DK weight yarn. Just pick a hook that you like and give the pattern a try. It's really plush and lovely. And again, you can make this to any size. You can make a baby blanket. You can make a full size, you know, Afghan. So hopefully you'll enjoy this pattern. I hope that the demonstration has given you some confidence to get started with this design. And hopefully you'll enjoy it.